Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Doug. I'm a wildlife photographer from Gilroy, California. And in this video, I'm going to tell you the story of an extraordinary event that occurred here in Santa Clara County this year with regard to bald eagles. Let me set the stage. So I have about 15 hours a week of time set aside for in-the-field bird photography. And this year I decided to spend all of that time watching bald eagles. I wanted to see the whole story, from the mating to the egg laying to the egg sitting to the raising of the eaglet. They did have one eaglet this year, to the fledging of the eaglet, and to the hanging around the lake and feeding, kind of weaning the eaglet off of food. I wanted to see all that, and I had an amazing season. But something crazy happened on May 20th that made the season even more unbelievable. So to set the stage, it was about 12 o'clock noon and I was wrapping it up for the day. I had taken down my tripod, I was putting on my backpack. I had the EOS R8 on. I was shooting a YouTube video with that camera, which is not my main camera, but its autofocus system is amazing, which is a great thing. I heard the eagle get really excited, which could only mean one thing. That means a food delivery is coming. So I dropped everything, took a guess the eagle would be coming in over my head, raised up my camera. I was shooting a 300 millimeter EF prime 2.8 aperture with a 2.0 teleconverter, so I was shooting at 600 millimeters. Eagle came right over my head and I fired away 15 frames per second, and these are the images I got. What a crazy thing, right? That is a baby red-tailed hawk, about 1 week old. And the crazy thing is that she was not injured. She was clearly alive, grabbing the tail feathers of mom. And yeah, I didn't even know what had happened. It all happened so fast. I thought maybe it was a duck. I knew it was kind of white. I didn't know if it was a Clark's grebe maybe, which has a lot of white on it. I wasn't sure what it was. But when I got home, I could not believe what I saw. And I have to admit, I was a little bit sad, disappointed with mom. And I am a biologist. My undergrad degree is in field biology, so I know about nature, but I'm still human. I'm kind of a softie. I'm like, oh, come on, mom, there's so much food. I mean, there's probably a dozen squirrels running around to this day underneath the nest. And the lake is less than a quarter mile away, filled with ducks, baby ducks, all kinds of waterfowl, squirrels everywhere, rabbits everywhere. You know, why did she have to go raid a nest? And this is a known phenomenon. Nevertheless, I posted the story on my Facebook page, and immediately some people said, you know, there have been a few reports in history of the parent bald eagles actually raising the little hawklet as their own. And I'm like, oh, come on, that sounds ridiculous. Red-tailed hawks and bald eagles are mortal enemies. That couldn't possibly happen. Nevertheless, I went back the next day. Everything was back to normal, I thought. And so the next day I went up there and it was so foggy I couldn't even see the nest. So the next 5 days I was out, and I only go up in the morning, usually from 6 to 12 or 6 to 1 or so is the time when the light is a little bit better. So I didn't get back to the next Saturday, and I started filming again that USR 8 video. And here is the raw footage from a screen recorder I was using. Unfortunately, the volume wasn't working, so you couldn't hear my shock when I saw this. But let me roll the real film here. It doesn't have any volume. Yeah, so the baby hawk is alive, right? It's unbelievable. I could not believe it. So I stopped the YouTube video, and then from now on, my life is devoted to just watching this little red-tailed hawk to see how it interacts with this giant eaglet, whose name is Lola after my oldest granddaughter. The red-tailed hawk, when I posted this on my Facebook page, people were saying, what a little Tuffy, what a little Tuffy. So I named that red-tailed hawk Tuffy. The story took off like wildfire. We had TV up there. I don't know how many newspaper interviews I did. This is a worldwide story because it's so rare, and everybody is rooting for the red-tailed hawk. It turns out there was another Tuffy that I think it was up in Oregon where this one occurred, and the story did not turn out well for Tuffy number one. So this is Tuffy number two, some people call it. But nevertheless, I'm off to the races. One more week left, and I have an almost 4-week vacation, so I'd be up there 40 hours a week. The next big thing that happened was about 3 days later, and I'll show you some pictures of that. And if you look closely, you can see another red-tailed hawk. So Mom had went and done the same thing. She grabbed another red-tailed hawk baby. I don't know if it was the same nest. This one was a little smaller. This one was much more quiet and docile in nature. This one got named Sheehan, means peaceful little one. And yeah, so now we have 2 red-tailed hawks in the nest, and to my understanding and my research, this has never happened before. This is the first account of this ever. And so now more and more photographers are starting to come up to the nest area. And this nest is way up in the mountains. There's no cell reception, so a lot of people don't make the trip, which is good. But usually I'm up there by myself or one or maybe 2 other photographers at the prime season of nesting. During this second week of Tuffy's life, you can see the difference in size. Tuffy is growing like crazy. These hawklets' maturation cycle is twice that of the bald eagle. So even though Lola, the bald eagle, was so much bigger, the little red-tailed hawklets were catching Lola with regard to development. And I guess that they're going to fledge pretty, and you know what fledging means. Fledging means that they're going to fly out of the nest for the first time. I guess that fledging would be pretty close, and it turned out that was true. It was about a week apart. Because one of the immediate worries is, now how is this going to end? Lola being so much older, she's going to fly away from the nest a lot and start hanging out down by the lake, and Mom and Dad will start feeding her down there, and will they come back and feed the hawklets? So that was a major concern. So the next thing that happened was on Monday, but let me go back one day. I was up there for a long time, probably 8 hours on Sunday, and Lola was flying all over the nest, doing a lot of helicoptering, and Tuffy, the biggest of the hawklets, was helicoptering as well. Not as good as Lola. Lola was climbing up on the perch and flying down to the nest. But even little Sheehan, the second little red-tailed hawklet, she was starting to try to helicopter. It was kind of funny. She didn't have all her feathers yet, but I got this really nice picture of her. And unfortunately, this will be the last picture ever captured of little Sheehan. So I wasn't able to go up on Monday. That was my full working day. So I come back on Tuesday, and there's only one red-tailed hawklet in the nest. I could tell immediately it was Tuffy because the markings on her head were different than those of Sheehan. And so now I'm wondering what in the heck happened to the little red-tailed hawklet, because she was clearly not around. I thought maybe she's in the bottom of the nest. Is she sick? And then the rancher who lived across from the street, who usually never talks to us, he came, drove in, rolled down his window and said that the dad bald eagle, who is not around in the morning very much, he came in last night and he killed Sheehan, the smallest red-tailed hawklet, was flinging his body around, and they proceeded to eat Sheehan, and that was the story there. And so that's terrible. We don't know what happened, why this behavior changed. The eagle experts assured us this wouldn't happen, and it did. And then everybody was speculating, oh, she must have been sick. She was not sick. She looked really good on Sunday anyway. She was flapping and looked like she had energy. I mean, she was always so much smaller and more docile than the bigger red-tailed hawklet Tuffy. So I don't know what happened. Later on, I was able to ask the rancher again, and as he was taking out his garbage, and he admitted that, I didn't see the actual killing. All I saw was the flunging around of a body up there, which is unusual because usually they bring the prey back and drop it at the bottom of the nest and then step on it and then pull up with their heads to rip it apart. So it seems kind of a weird story. But nevertheless, there's no doubt that the smallest red-tailed hawklet is gone, and now everybody is very worried that the same might happen to Tuffy. Time goes by, and things were okay. the eagles seemed to be leaving Tuffy alone. And in fact, I saw Dad feed Tuffy and got some good video of that I'll flash up right now. So everything seemed to be fine. Everybody's relaxed a little bit. What a roller coaster ride this was, by the way, for those who really got into this. So everything is fine. Lola and Tuffy are getting along great. See some examples of something called auto preening, where Lola would preen the feathers gently with her beak to try to spread the oil over the feathers. Tuffy didn't really like it, but I'll put some video of that up. These two were buddies. As far as Lola was concerned, this was her biological nest mate. And Lola there was a nice bond between these two. The parents' bond with the red-tailed hawk turned out to be the problem. So the next thing that happens is Lola fledges. And I missed it. It was on a Sunday, and got mixed reports from my sources and Facebook, because there's other people following the story, not just me. And the ones that I rely on said she fell out of the nest and kind of fluttered down to the ground below, and she flew up in the bushes. And when I got there Monday morning, that's exactly where she was. She spent the night in the bushes, really in the thick. She was hungry and crying. She had missed a feeding. And we just waited for her to fly out of the bushes. So we figured that would happen when Mom brought in a food delivery. But about 11 o'clock, Lola came crashing out of the bushes, flew right out through the sticks, and we all thought, there's 3 of us up there watching this, and we thought, what an amazing and powerful animal this is to crash out of the bushes, brand new at this flying. She missed the nest and crashed into the branches of the nest tree above. Unfortunately, she landed right where a bullock's oriole nest was, so she got bombed. Mom and Dad Bullock Oriole did not like her there. She learned real quickly there are some places she should not perch, and that was one. So she flew out of that area and missed the nest again and landed higher up in the nest tree, hung out there for about an hour, and then something amazing happened. So the winds were picking up, the ground was heating up, and you get these thermal currents that rise up like that. And that's perfect for turkey vultures and bald eagles to do circles and ride those currents and go higher and higher into the sky without using much energy. And to our surprise, Lola did exactly that. She circled about 10 times and got higher and higher and higher. And we're all looking at each other going, this is absolutely amazing. She already is a really good flyer, and it's not even 24 hours since she fledged. And then something crazier happened, and perhaps a little ironic. 2 red-tailed hawks spotted her and attacked her. And on the first run, Lola lost a few feathers. They hit Lola. The second time they came around for another pass, Lola flipped upside down and is flying inverted in the air. I have pictures of this. She's way up there, but I have some pictures. And she was able to fend off the attacks. And that was it. The red-tailed hawks took off. She flipped back around and flew normally and flew out of sight. And so what an amazing flyer Lola was. Not even 24 hours after fledging, and she's flying off into the sunset. I hung around another couple hours, thought she would come back, but she didn't. And my sources say that she did come back and land in the nest around sundown and got fed. So everything was doing great. So now the question is, when is Tuffy, the little red-tailed hawklet, going to fledge? Because of our worry, Mom's going to feed Lola away from the nest pretty soon, and Tuffy needs to fledge quickly. And that happened the next week. So I like to get up there early in the morning because Tuffy's very active and doing a lot of helicoptering. I can put some video up of that right now. Always great photography early in the morning. And then she did something crazy. There's 2 of us up there. She flew right at us over our heads and crashed with a bang into the tree behind us. And that tree, unfortunately, had red-shouldered hawks living in it. There was 2 hawklets about Tuffy's age, and Mom and Dad did not like her presence there, and they were in her face yelling at her. She was in thick branches, so they couldn't really attack her much, but they were screaming at her. I knew it wouldn't be long before she had to come back to the nest. And here's another crazy story. So she flies out from this tree heading for the nest, and we got a tailwind, a pretty good tailwind, 10, 15-mile-an-hour tailwind blowing, which is unusual. But she was coming in way too fast. Lola has been watching this thing. So the eaglet jumps up in front of the nest and blocks it like an ice hockey goalie, getting ready to defend against someone charging down the ice and trying to score a goal. There was nowhere for Tuffy to land. She could either crash into the nest, crash into Lola, or go over the top. So she chose the latter and went over the top of screaming Lola and crashed into the nest tree. It was the craziest thing. I had video of it, but for whatever reason I can't find it. But I have still pictures of the event, and let's throw some of those up right now. So now we have Tuffy and Lola fledged about a week apart, but there was a huge difference. Now I don't know if Tuffy got hurt when she crashed into the trees, but the next couple days she didn't try to fledge much again. She hung around the nest and got feedings. I have followed red-tailed hawklets before, and they don't fledge like Lola did. Maybe one day she had a little bit of trouble, not even one day, and she could fly. They seem to hang around in the trees a lot. They're almost like a flying squirrel, and they glide between branches, and they do a lot of climbing. And this is what Tuffy was doing. And she was starting to miss feedings because of this. She was coming to the nest late, and Lola was getting so big she could rip up the food now by herself and swallow it whole. At least smaller, like ducklings and smaller rodents. So Tuffy was starting to miss feedings. And she went 3 days without eating. On the third day, I remember she was in the red shoulder hawk tree again. The feeding came. And I don't know if she was hurt, but it took her 6 hours to get back to the nest tree. She was crying the whole time. So I have a feeling she might have been hurt. But she missed the feeding again, so now we're getting worried. But luckily, Lola is starting to spend more and more time away from the nest. So on this day, Tuffy got 2 feedings. Dad brought in a duckling, and Tuffy is now strong enough that she can rip up the duckling pretty good, and she feasted all morning. Dad didn't help her, but he didn't bother her either, and Lola wasn't around. A couple hours later, Mom brought in a big duck and dropped it in there. And she went a step further than Dad. She actually started ripping the duck up for Tuffy, who I don't know how she was still hungry, but she went down and started eating. And I counted 16 feedings right in a row where there was no trouble at all. But then the first indication that Mom, at least, was starting to question whether or not this little red-tailed hawklet was hers, because after 16 straight feedings, she started getting annoyed with Tuffy and started pecking him in the head and chasing him away. And I had never seen this before. And so I thought the bond between these two was starting to break. The eagle experts were saying, "Oh, everything's okay, don't worry about it." This didn't make sense because I didn't see this with Lola. Lola could do just about anything to Mom and no reaction. In fact, here's a video of Lola stealing what was left of a duck from Mom, dropping it, and then grabbing Mom by the leg and trying to pull Mom. I don't know what she was doing, trying to pull Mom out of position, or she wanted Mom out of the nest, but Mom did not react at all. So there's definitely a difference going on between the way Mom is treating Lola versus the way Mom is treating the red-tailed hawklet, Tuffy. All right, as time goes by, things are getting worse with regard to this behavior. Sometimes Mom would feed Tuffy okay, and sometimes she would get really annoyed. And this behavior was escalating to the point she was now chasing Tuffy out of the nest. And so here's an example of where Tuffy came maybe 5 minutes late to the feeding, and Mom saw Tuffy. Well, let you look at the video and you judge for yourself what's going on here. So an eagle biologist, a veteran eagle biologist, commented on this and said, these are attacks. The eagle experts on Facebook were saying, no, this was normal behavior. This was a lesson to show the red-tailed hawk not to be late for dinner, which was ridiculous. But these were full-out attacks, and this behavior was going to get even worse. All right, so it is about a week before the 4th of July, and this was a crazy day. It was super hot. There was nobody up there except a bird watcher and myself. And Lola came in, which usually means mom is not far behind. Tuffy is under the nest for whatever reason. Here comes mom with the food delivery. It's a small squirrel. So she drops it off and sits up on the perch and watches. Lola rips up the squirrel, and Tuffy will not come into the nest. And I'm like, what is the matter? The little hawklet needs to eat. She doesn't come up. Lola ends up eating the squirrel and then swallowing what's left of it whole. It's amazing how big of animals she can swallow whole. So the meal is gone. Lola flies over about 15 yards away onto one of her favorite perches out of the sun. Mom flies over and joins her. They're not looking at the nest. Tuffy immediately comes up into the nest, looks around, and there's no food, and she starts crying. Mom rubbernecks and gives her this look like, I'm going to kill you. And I've seen that before, but I've never seen this. She flies off the perch, does a U-turn, and comes back full speed at Tuffy, talons out, and, well, let me show you the video so you can judge for yourself. That was absolutely insane. And this camera was shooting at 120 frames per second slow motion. In real life, it looked like mom was trying to kill her. I knew it was over at this point. You can clearly see on the fourth pass, Tuffy tried to jump out of the way. Mom got Tuffy by the leg and whiplashed her out of the nest and dragged her into the middle of that tree and dropped her. What's not shown is mom comes back around again. Tuffy's trying to climb back up that tree and does the same thing, and Tuffy falls again. Mom is really upset, and the bond between Tuffy, the red-tailed hawk, and mom is severely eroded. So at this point, in my mind, it was over. Tuffy was not going to survive. She was not eating very much. I didn't know if she was hurt from this incident. It ended up she got back in the nest after mom left, maybe an hour later. She looked okay, but there's no food. Mom's not letting her eat. And it takes about 4 weeks before a red-tailed hawklet is able to feed herself and make kills for herself. So there's no way this was going to last. I contacted the Park Service. This story is going on park land, on county land. And unfortunately, they said, there's nothing we can do about this. We know about the story. This is a famous hawklet, but there's nothing we can do. As far as we're concerned, Tuffy is a meal for mom and Lola that should have been executed, pardon the pun, a long time ago. So there's nothing we can do. I called some rescue agencies. They said the same thing. They did say that federal authority trumps state and park services. So they recommended talking to Fish and Game. I couldn't even get through to them. I left messages. No one even got back to me. But then somebody on my Facebook page said, you know, there is a guy in San Francisco who is federally licensed to rescue birds of prey. And so I got in touch with him, and he said the same thing, but he did give me a little bit of hope. He said, if Tuffy goes down away from the nest, call me and I might be able to get permission to rescue. Turns out the eagle nest is protected within a 100-yard radius. Some sources say 300-yard radius, which would be crazy. I mean, there's a road that goes by there closer than that. So anyway, and this guy, his name was Craig, he went up there and he checked things out. So he was really into this. He really wanted to try to save Tuffy. And But unfortunately, and people were outraged on Facebook, they were getting mad at me, like they wanted me to climb up the eagle tree, which is 60, 70, 80 feet high. I mean, I'm not a tree climber, I'm an old guy. I can't climb that high anyway. But they're irritated. But no one was going to be allowed to climb up that eagle's nest. It turns out that there have been cases where they've tried rescue, and once mom and dad see that a human's been up there, they won't nest there again. And this nest was 7 years old, and it's been productive 2 years in a row. So no one's going to take a chance on messing that up. So on Saturday, I go up there. I decided I was going to do an evening shift up there. I got up there around 2 o'clock or so. And they told me that Tuffy was there and she got a little bit of food. Mom brought a food delivery in and didn't attack her. But that was it. There was no more food deliveries. And Lola and Tuffy were crying all afternoon for food. And Mom just was not in the mood to feed them, nor was Dad. But I did see something cool. Mom, Dad, Lola, and Tuffy were all in the same nesting tree in various positions on the tree. I'll roll some of that video right now. When Tuffy flew in, Mom was not happy. She was sitting up on the upper perch with Lola, and she gave Tuffy that look like she's going to attack and started screaming at Tuffy. Lola was getting blasted with these screams because she was in between Mom and Tuffy, but she settled down and let Tuffy get up into the nest. And I thought, oh, at least we have kind of the semi happy family here this evening. But then something unexpected happened. Tuffy just jumped up and flew off. She flew over the first row of trees about 100 yards away and flew into the woods about 250 yards away. And it was dark. It was about 8:30. And I'm like, oh my God, she doesn't even feel comfortable enough to spend the night. So this is not a good sign. But nevertheless, Tuffy had a really good day. I was told that she ate earlier on. She was flying all over the nest tree today. She flew 30 yards away, was following Lola. She looked playful. Everything looked great. And she made that huge flight 250 yards away at dark. So I was feeling pretty good that, hey, maybe Tuffy's going to just eat the scraps. I know their red-tailed hawklets are able to survive on bugs, or at least stay alive longer on bugs, at least for a while, from what I've been told. So maybe she'll stick this out. Maybe she'll find some roadkill. So I was feeling good. I took Sunday off. And Craig went up on Sunday, and reports from the ground said nobody saw Tuffy all day. They thought they might have heard her back in the trees, but I don't think so because there's another red-tailed hawk that's about maybe 400 yards back in the woods behind this tree, and she sounds just like Tuffy, so I have a feeling they were confused on that. But nobody laid eyes on Tuffy. I was probably the last one to see Tuffy as she flew off over the trees and into the woods. So I'm like, oh, wow, this does not sound good. I came up first thing Monday morning. I'm looking all over for Tuffy. I went up and down. I went into the woods. I looked everywhere. No Tuffy. I couldn't hear her crying. She must have been hungry because I know she didn't eat all day yesterday. No Tuffy. So my plan was I was going to set up on the nest and wait for the feeding to come, and that should at least make Tuffy cry a little bit. And as I was setting up, I did hear two faint cries coming from a tree no more than 15 yards away from me. It was a big oak tree. Tuffy had been in this tree. It was close to the red-shouldered hawk tree. It was 40 feet tall and it was pretty thick. So I looked and looked. I couldn't find Tuffy anywhere in the tree, but I was confident that she was in that tree, and I thought the feeding would bring her out of the tree. So I set up on the nest and waited. One other photographer showed up and I told him the story. He looked around, couldn't find her in the tree either. So we're waiting for the food delivery to come. So here it comes, and Tuffy cries 2 times, and that was it. So we looked and looked in the tree, and he was able to see Tuffy way up at the top, sitting there, and Tuffy did not look good. Lola flew in, gobbled down the food. Tuffy didn't cry. She didn't try to fly. She didn't even look at the nest. This was not good. Her eyes were closed about 50% of the time. We observed her for about an hour and a half, and she literally didn't move. She pooped a little bit, and there was hardly any poop coming out of her, just a tiny bit, which is not a good sign, meaning she hadn't eaten in a long time. This other bird photographer was a veteran wildlife photographer. He knew some sounds to play that would stimulate a normal red-tailed hawklet. Nothing. Great horned owl, prey sounds, predator sounds, nothing worked. We even threw some sticks into the lower part of the tree to see if that would get a response from the hawklet. Nothing. So I decided I was going to drive down the hill, about a 20-minute drive. There's no cell reception, at least for Verizon up there. So drove down the hill, and I called Craig, and I said, Tuffy is in bad shape. She's non-responsive. Can you come rescue her? And he said, grab yourself lunch. This might take a while, but I'm going to try to get permission to come up there and rescue her. So I got a call back in about 20 minutes. He was all excited. He did get the paperwork from Fish and Game to do a net rescue attempt. He would have to climb up in the tree. Tuffy's 40 feet up in the tree, so he had to be a good climber to make it up there, but he had a long extension net. So anyway, I drive back up there. We wait for Craig to show up. 2 other photographers showed up. Craig shows up. The ranger shows up. That was part of the stipulation. This is under the guidance of the head ranger. Very nice young man, strong, happened to be a rock climber. So Craig commandeers all of us. He forbid us to take any pictures or post anything on social media. Said he didn't want the paparazzi up here. He said he's dealt with them before and it's no good. So that was part of the deal. No photography, no posting on social media. So I helped Craig and the ranger. I went under the tree. The others were sent to various areas to watch in case Tuffy flew out of the tree. We wanted to know where she went so we could continue the rescue. Craig is not a young man. He's probably about my age, and he is not an arborist, which surprised me a little bit. So he doesn't know how or doesn't have the equipment to climb trees other than a ladder. So he climbs up there, and he can't get very far. The ranger is a young, strong rock climber. He offers to help, and Craig says, yep, under my supervision, you could help. He shoots up there like a squirrel, but there was one section below Tuffy where you have to bear hug the tree and shimmy up. He couldn't do that. He probably could have done that, and he tried, but the bark was just ripping off his fingers, and he looked down at us and he said, sorry guys, I'm going to proclaim this part of the operation over. It's just too dangerous unless we can find a certified rescue arborist. There was a ranger who had gotten his certification in tree rescue, but unfortunately he couldn't get a hold of him. I don't know if he was off or he was out in a distant area of the park, but he couldn't get a hold of him. So now things are looking bad. And plus, Craig says Tuffy's not going to make it through the night, and the ranger agreed. Tuffy, while all this commotion is going on right underneath him, Tuffy didn't move an inch. Eyes are closed 75% of the time. It's looking really, really bad. So Craig says, unfortunately, Tuffy's not going to make it through the night. Let me try one more thing, though. So it turns out one of the photographers had AT&T, and she had 1 bar. So Craig was able to text Fish and Game an update and ask permission to try a live trapping. And he was excited. He said, I got permission, but don't get your hopes up because I don't think this is going to work. For one, Tuffy's never flown down to the ground before. She doesn't know what prey really is. For 2, she doesn't have any power to even move. I don't think she's going to be able to fly. But nevertheless, we're going to try this. So I go out in the field and look for a spot where Tuffy can see a cage of mice. And so we set up this cage of mice and waited a couple hours, and Tuffy not only didn't look at the mice, she didn't look anywhere. she looked really, really bad, and it looked like this was the end. So everybody took their goodbye pictures of Tuffy. I was going to stick it out until dark. I was going to be up there till 9, so I was up there alone with Tuffy. Here's the last video and pictures of Tuffy. Unfortunately, guys, that was the last time anyone would ever see Tuffy alive. We found her body 2 days later. I took her body down the hill, called Craig. Craig had arranged for a necropsy to be performed by the state. The state didn't charge us, which was great. And this is unusual because they don't usually do this on birds of prey, but because this was such a high-profile case, I think everybody wanted to know what the cause of death was. I'm not allowed to post the report, but I can tell you that the findings confirmed the field exam that Craig and I did, at least some of it, where Tuffy was severely malnourished and emaciated. On a fullness scale of 0 to 5, where 5 is a nice, full, meaty bird, Tuffy scored a 0.5. She was emaciated. When I picked her up, guys, she was skin and bone. It was really sad. We didn't see any obvious injuries to the body, though. But on the actual necropsy, they found multiple puncture marks from talons all over her body. They found a broken sternum. And the thing that actually killed her is she had talon marks in her skull that penetrated the brain and damaged the brain. So very sad. The official cause of death was talon-induced head trauma, complicated by severe malnutrition. All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. I will end by playing a couple of video clips that I didn't get to in the rest of this. These are two of my favorite. Both of them show how strong and gutsy Tuffy was. She was much more aggressive in the nest compared to Lola, which might have been the problem and might have been the reason why some of that confusion in Mom's mind wore off, because she wasn't acting like an eaglet in the nest. She was very aggressive, as you will see. And then we'll end with some of my favorite still images of Tuffy the red-tailed hawklet. If you have any questions at all, leave them down below, and like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.